This is TWiT.
Stacey Higginbotham, host at StaceyOnIoT.com, at GigaStacey on the Twitter, and our IoT expert. And actually, the first story is right up your alley, and I know you're ready to talk about this. The Biden administration has announced its new Smart Home Cybersecurity label. It's the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark.
Really? You're going to use
you could show Stacey's. You could show Stacey's, which I put in the rundown.
Okay, I don't know.
I put
you. How dare you?
Their headline was Biden administration does a cybersecurity label for smart TVs, which I was like, I mean.
How about this? According to Stacey on IoT, the White House details its IoT security label plan. So what is it and how do it work?
This is the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark. They introduced the concept of doing this back in October, and the Biden administration is basically creating a voluntary program, kind of like the EPA's Energy Star thing. And if you see this on a product, and it won't be out till like 2024, but if you see this mark on a product,
you can trust it.
This product has met cybersecurity standards. And you might be like, what standards, Stacey? And the answer is, we don't exactly know that, but.
So your article says they're leaning on a NIST document, the National Institutes of Standards and Time.
Yes.
So what is
the NIST 8524 document? It's actually a really good document. So this came out in 2022. Y'all are like, Stacey, that's crazy. It's too much. It's 30 pages. It's not. Don't worry. What NIST has done basically is they took a deep dive into IoT and they were like, well, crap, IoT is really hard to secure for a couple reasons. One, you got hardware, software, cloud, all this stuff. You got an ecosystem of devices talking to each other. And then you've got devices that range from like really important things like medical devices all the way down to like, I used to have an egg counter. Right? That counted my eggs. And all of those different levels of
timed your eggs or counted them?
It was called the quirky egg counter. And
did it count how many eggs you have?
It literally only existed to let me know how many eggs were in my fridge. It was a fun thing that I got.
Wait, what? I've heard of an egg timer, but an egg counter seems not
as confusing as coffee time.
So useful as all that. Anyway. Good. I hope it's secure. God bless it. Better be secure.
Don't want to let the Chinese know how many eggs you have.
But the server went down. But the point is, like, that thing did not need, like...
They went out of business.
We can talk
how
about
do
that
I count my eggs?
Not until they're hatched, young man.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Is that a dozen?
Anyway.
Is it 5? I don't know.
Unbelievable.
So that is an example of a device that you're like, if someone can see how many eggs I have, I don't care.
Yeah,
but if someone can see like my blood glucose or maybe can hack my pacemaker, that's very different.
Even more than that, it could be a gateway into your network. So even if
it could be a gateway,
it's not merely that they could hack your egg counter, it's that they could then get into your network and do other bad things.
That is true.
Right.
And that is why they're doing this. That is one of the big reasons why the Biden administration has come out with this labeling plan and everybody's on board. And by everybody, I do mean everybody. Like the CTA is on board, the CSA, which is doing the Matter standard, is on board, Amazon, Google, Samsung, Best Buy, Logitech, like lots of companies are on board. But the standards so far are really good. There are things like no default passwords. You're going to need multi-factor authentication, encryption at rest on the device, encryption when it's going anyplace else, and then encryption where it's stored in the cloud.
Nice.
There's actually a really interesting thing that we don't see on a lot of IoT devices, which is data logging. They want to, NIST calls, let me rephrase this. NIST calls for things like data logging and monitoring. So manufacturers and consumers should be able to see what's happening, who their devices are communicating with, how often they're communicating, logging changes to the systems. So you can read the document, you can read my blog post where I sum up like fairly quickly what the 6 items that NIST is kind of looking for are. But here's the devil in the details that always happens with any legislative effort. What the White House announced is like we've got this label, and they showed off the label. Yay. What they still need to do is build the program and actually set the security criteria. So they're going to do that with the FCC. And the FCC they're going to start what it's called a notice of proposed rulemaking, but it's basically how the FCC sets rules. And you'll get a chance to comment on all of these rules. Everybody else will. And then the FCC is going to be like, here are the official criteria from on high.
Is this somewhere else we see lobbyists coming into play and saying, hey, well, we really like this?
Yeah, because this stuff costs money. You can't, the only reason they wouldn't build it in is because it costs money to do it and to maintain it. Can I ask one question?
Well,
does the NIST document talk about auto updating? Because I think we agree, the most important feature of all.
It does talk about auto updates. I think it's like the 4th section, maybe you were scrolling through.
Yeah, good. So it does suggest that these devices should be firmware updatable in case of.
They have to be firmware updatable.
Very important. Good.
And I will say the NIST rules are very comprehensive. The one thing this label doesn't have that I'm really bummed about, but maybe it'll get it in the comments, I don't know, is privacy. So there's nothing in here talking about like how someone's data, like what sensors are on a device, how your data from that device is actually used. It's just all about, so this is all security only, which is good, but privacy is still a big part for most consumers.
They do talk a little bit about it should, the data should be, they don't talk about privacy at all?
So in 2.2.2, it's in documentation, but that is not actually one of the things you're going to need.
Okay.
Like to get, it's not one of their, I don't remember the words they used to describe it, but the product capabilities. So there's 6 product capabilities that need to be there. And if you go into developer activities, 2.2.2 is documentation. And that talks about like things you should have in there. But
well, and also the Biden administration did not commit to fully supporting this document. They said leaning on this NIST document, which is, by the way,
they got to see what it turns into.
National Institute of Standards and Technology, not time. I said time. And they are responsible for time, but it's technologies.
Yeah.
So, more than just time. Okay. This looks pretty good, though. I mean, it's impressive. What's the next step? Do they have to go to Congress, or can this be done by fiat?
No, the FCC is going to sometime soon-ish, within the next month or so, I hope, will issue what they call a notice of proposed rulemaking. Okay. And then there'll be like, it's usually like a 60-day comment period. It can be anywhere from like 30 to 90-day comment period. And that's when they're going to be like, hey, here's the NIST document. Here are the rules we're thinking of. What do you think? And then people like write in, tell them what they think. And then the FCC will vote at a meeting to approve the program.
Good.
Now, open questions. I mentioned privacy. Second open question. Hey, what happens if you don't, like, if you say you're secure and then you're not?
Yeah, what's the fine?
We don't know.
That's more FTC than FCC in that case, isn't it?
Well, no, because the FCC is responsible for this program. And if you talk to people in Washington, the reason why is the FCC is like, we'll do it. And the FTC is like, God, give it to them. We are so busy.
FCC has more enforcement arms than the FTC. FTC has very limited enforcement capability.
FTC is busy losing cases these days, too. So
Don't say that. Cory Doctorow would spank you for that. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah. So that's this. Oh, there's also so the trust mark will be on the box, presumably sometime around 2024 is the hope. And then there's also going to be a QR component, which is where you can look to see more fine-tuned details, fine-grained details about things. And because security doesn't stay still, it's also where you'll be able to check and make sure it's still secure. So if you're buying this box, you're buying it from a Best Buy in the middle of nowhere and it's been on the shelf for 2 years, you can be like, hey, are you still legit?
With this announcement, have you seen any opposition?
No one's going to explicitly.
No, because no one's
not yet anyway.
No, they'd all be under the table and say, "Hey, Senator Manchin, this is a terrible idea. Would you mind helping us out a little bit?"
That's what it like coal line somewhere. All of this stuff because it just seems like
so they'll come in to weaken some of the things. You'll see their comments. Yeah, you'll see them in the comments saying things like, "All right, no default passwords is fine, but requiring multi-factor authentication for some of this stuff is just too much."
It's too much. Yeah.
Do they? Do they require MFA?
You would be surprised. So MFA is mentioned in there as one of the better ways to handle this.
But not required, because that's a little... most consumers are not going to know how to do that.
Every device is actually... So I talked to Ann, Neuberger. What's her title? This is audio. Anyway, I talked to... I'm not going to call her.
Ann Neuberger, national security official who serves as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies for the Biden administration. That Ann Neuberger?
Yes, that is who I said. Yes, that.
Okay.
Neuberger. That's Ann. So she like with Energy Star, every appliance has different criteria they have to meet, different levels based on what they are. Because like to make an energy efficient washing machine is different than making an energy efficient refrigerator. Okay. So there will be standards for different sets of devices, different IoT devices. So you may not need MFA on your egg counter, but you might need it on your baby monitor.
Okay. That's
going to be part.
Yeah.
So they're going to hide a lot of complexity behind this, which is good because most consumers, they don't want to understand all that, and they shouldn't have to.
There's an old joke about Silicon Valley companies, new startups, releasing the T-shirt before they release the product. And this is the Biden administration releasing the T-shirt before they have anything.
This is indeed.
They got a label anyway. Hey, we got a label.
All right.
There'll be a lot more.
But as Stacey would always say, discussion is good. We need the discussion.
Yeah. But, I mean, really, seriously, they're announcing a label before they have a standard.
Good point.
Come on.
Well, in October, so they announced this. They actually announced that they wanted to create this label back in October. Okay, so we were all like, okay, and then NIST got, they were like, okay, here's what we want this to do, and this was supposed to be announced in April, and it was not. So these things take more time than.
Hey, we got a T-shirt. I'm not complaining. But let's finish the job and
we're gonna get an NPRM. It's gonna be amazing.
Good.
So let the record also show I got CC'd on an email this morning from Craig Newmark to Stacey, responding to her newsletter saying what good news this is and how excited he is.
Oh, I think it's huge news
about cybersecurity.
But remember, there's a presidential election in a year. And who knows, a new Congress in 2 years. And
Well, but okay, so
and new
the
members
FCC
of the FCC
will have made their rules.
Yeah.
Well, no, but
Let's
new members.
Get going. Let's hurry up.
We'll have the criteria by the end of this year, presumably.
Good.
And then, so you would be able to see it before the election. 2024 is when we're doing the election.
The other thing I really like is there's a kind of a nutrition label for IoT security and privacy facts that will be on the box. So I think that's for a consumer even more than the badge. That's going to be of value.
So that's not necessarily what it's going to look like. That's theoretical.
You mean there's no Bravo Temp or Eco House thermostats?
No, I'm talking about the data that's going to be on that label.
But at least they want to do something
not
like
everybody
this.
does.
Well, of course, yeah. That's the last thing.
So that's a proposed label. I think that's the Scilab's proposed label. That's not actually.
Well, this is from the FCC. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Obviously there will be opposition. Although the good news is a lot of the IoT manufacturers that don't want this are Chinese no-name brands that aren't probably going to have much lobbying clout in the halls of Washington, D.C. And in fact, the big companies like Amazon and Wise who are trying to compete against these no-name companies will. So let's hope that Amazon and Wise and Apple and all these other companies say, here's an opportunity for us to distinguish our high-quality products from these inexpensive Chinese knockoffs. I hope.
That is the hope. That's a different label. Okay, so that might be the FCC's label because that's a take from the Scilab's label, which has way too much information on it. So
yeah.
Can I ask a question, Stacey?
Yeah.
It strikes me that when we talk about cybersecurity here, there's two ends of this. You've talked about the consumer end of this. You want your baby monitor to be safe so somebody can't snoop in on it or whatever. But then there's the larger national cybersecurity question about you're shutting down systems and wreaking havoc. What is this really more about?
So remember Mirai all the way back in 2015? It was December 2015. Yeah. So that actually was taking over networked video cameras. And they weren't actually true IoT devices. They weren't modern. But what that did is that allowed hackers to take over and gather an enormous amount of bandwidth that was then used against U.S. companies or just companies. So this is more so there's two things. The main thing is we don't want to give hackers access to bandwidth from consumer devices that they can then use to attack websites of whatever infrastructure, whatever, right? So to do those kind of DDoS attacks. The other element is that's because consumers are dumb. We're not cybersecurity experts. We shouldn't have to be, right? So they want to lock that vector down. And then the other part is it's good for consumers. I mean, if you can also benefit consumers by making it so, I mean, we haven't seen anything like this yet, but it's not implausible to think of hackers getting a hold of popular like thermostats and doing a ransomware attack that, locks everybody's thermostat, locks everyone out in.
Right, but what I'm trying to get to is this. I wonder whether there's going to be much consumer interest or demand for labels on things beyond your standard moral panic. The Chinese are watching, whereas the real import here is to not let their devices be taken over and bad things happen at a national level, at an infrastructural level. So that it's really the government that should care more about this than the consumer. Whether the consumer cares or not may not matter so much as whether or not there's an agreement on the things that matter at the higher infrastructural level.
There's 2 points there. One is that we're bringing things into our home that are going to be ultimately connected back to our public infrastructure. If you look at like demand response programs and this goal towards smarter energy management, and they mention in here they're going to work with the EPA for inverters and car chargers. We're bringing things into our home that we're buying that are going to be connected back to the public grid in that case. And the government does have a vested interest in us.
I agree with that. I think that's what I'm saying. That's the important part, is the government's interest more than consumers.
But yeah, in stopping DDoS attacks and those things are very important. But I do think there is also interest in making sure that a large swath of consumers doesn't suddenly see all of their door locks open at once. Because we will...
Okay, that's good. Right, all right.
It's a variety of things.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to understand the consumer demand for this.
But it is voluntary. And so I could always buy an insecure device, but then at least the government will say, oh, well, I'm sorry that Russia hacked
You're going to hear people like us and other, The Verge and everybody else say, make sure you get this. You want this. You don't want to buy a device that doesn't have this. I think that's, it just gives us a way to, in a simple way. I mean, we've been saying for ages, you've been saying for ages, Stacey, for instance, don't buy any IoT device that's not firmware updatable over OTA. And we could say that until we're blue in the face, but most people don't even understand what we're saying.
That's what I was going to say.
But that badge will say it.
That badge,
people want that.
You still probably want to add an additional note to that and say, hey, make sure it's this particular badge and not just company XYZ throwing their own version of the badge on there. Because
you'll want the...
Well, you have to look for the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark.
Right. That's the thing.
Yeah, there's
really need to
the
specify.
U.S. Cyber Trust Mark. Right. No, I think that people aren't that dumb. No, they're not. No, they're not. In fact, it's one of the reasons Apple with HomeKit has an advantage, because people go, oh, Apple, they're going to do this more securely, so I'm going to trust HomeKit devices over some no-name Chinese smart plug.
Apple's built that trust.
And I think that this is, look, it's our job to make this work. It's their job to make sure that this happens, and there are reasonable laws, and the lobbyists don't take all this stuffing out of the ottoman. But I think it's our job also to tell consumers, make sure, look for the Cyber Trust Mark.
Right.
Because that's important.
And I don't know
if it's done right.
Who looks for the Energy Star. I mean, they're modeling this out of the Energy Star.
No, we all do.
Okay.
And every refrigerator you buy. No. You can't miss it. Go to an appliance store.
That's true.
There's
that's
a
true.
big
Huge.
number on the. You can't miss it.
Yeah.
And people are smart enough to say that's going to cost me more in electricity than that one is.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but that's cost. That's money. That's a pocketbook thing. This isn't money so much as, in fact,
people are still concerned about security. Like, I will tell you, and granted, my audience, they're great big giant nerds.
Yes,
so,
they are.
They're like us, but I'd like probably 50% of the questions I get about connected devices are, hey, I'm looking at this thing. It's awesome. It's only $5. Is it secure?
Oh,
no.
okay.
I can't believe Jeff and Ant are arguing that in the favor of people being too stupid to care about this. They care about this. They really do. They do, and they will. We're going to make them care.
These are the same people that are just all over TikTok and worried about China and those threats too.
Well, that's because other media forces have made them care about that. People listen, and we just have to make sure they understand this is important. I think this is not going to. Really,
I hope they care. I just hope that there's an
extra
bit of diligence on our part in administration to say, hey, this is what we really need to care about.
Well, the only thing you could do a step beyond this was something like the FDA, which is, if it's not NIST approved, it's not available for sale in the U.S. And I imagine if security becomes a bigger issue, maybe that will happen. People are aware. People don't want to get hacked. Yeah, how many people run antivirus software?
Wait a minute. People don't want to get hacked, but how many people with their password is password?
Well, that's just because the word hasn't gotten out. That's a failure of technology
That's actually
journalism.
it's gotten much better.
It has, absolutely.
I actually got data on this like a couple months ago that was that showed, and it was actually generational. They broke it out by generations. And except for boomers, everybody's gotten that message.
Hey,
it's funny looking here in the Discord and
mine is password !
There you go.
You put a bang on yours. Okay.
Yeah.
People in the Discord are applauding you and your faith in people's intelligence, where I not so much.
Quippy says, I'm with Jeff and Ant. People are dumber than you think. And even the smart ones pretend to be dumb. For fear, people will think them intelligent and they'll be kicked out of the in-group.
In the in-group, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're dumb. It's that what's their motivation to care?
They don't care. Right. There's plenty of motivation to care. There's been enough news about bad guys spying on you now that they are aware of it. And
much of that is moral panic and ridiculous.
That's fine.
Stacey's argument is the best one and I'm never going to put in one of these door locks anyway, but you don't want it to open, without by some bad hack going on.
Honestly, that's how people show they care. They say, I'm staying away from IoT, which is why IoT companies ought to go along with this.
They ought to go along with this.
Yeah. Well, IoT companies have wanted the government to do something, like the good ones have. Like when I talk to people who are building connected devices, they're like, look, Stacey, I would love to really go whole hog on this, but I can't because I have to make my device as cheap as this no-name thing from China because people don't know the difference.
Right.
With this, they've got something like everybody who cares about this will be working towards this standard. And then everybody who doesn't, you could still buy a cheap no-name sensor, but you won't know if it's as secure. And there will be, and people will still buy that.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong.
There'll be plenty of
100% do that.
But it's like public health. You don't have to have everybody get vaccinated to have a real impact on the spread of a disease. And so it's just a public health measure. And if more people buy this than don't, then that's a good thing, and it'll make a big difference, I think. And I think that there's some incentive for business not to undermine this, but to make it a real standard.
A lot of companies legitimately want this. And the fact that Best Buy and Amazon were there and talking about how that could be used in retail settings.
Good.
So, it's not just the manufacturers, it's also the people who sell these devices are like, we really want to make this work.
It's in their interest. They get DDoSed. They get breached. It's in their interest to do this. It's good for everybody. And economically, it gives them a foot up against Chinese knockoffs, which are eating their lunch. So I think this might actually have a shot. Crossing my fingers because this does need to happen. This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. If you're ready for a new career in IT, then check out ACI Learning. They offer affordable certification-based training that will help you launch your new career in IT. Individuals use the code TWiT30 for 30% off a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership at go.acilearning.com/twit.